Let me start with a question that should make you pause. Why do so many heart attacks and strokes happen between 5 a.m. and 11 a.m.? Not at night, not after heavy meals, but in the early morning hours when people are just waking up. This is not random. This is biology. And once you understand what your body is doing in the morning, you'll also understand how to protect yourself. Most people think heart attacks are caused by a sudden event. In reality, they are the result of years of silent damage. And the morning is when the body is under its highest stress load. Let's break this down simply. In the early morning hours, your body undergoes a powerful and very deliberate biological transition. As you move from sleep toward wakefulness, the brain signals the adrenal glands to release stress hormones, primarily cortisol and adrenaline. These hormones are not harmful by themselves. In fact, they are essential for survival. They are designed to raise alertness, mobilize energy, and prepare the cardiovascular system for activity. The problem begins when this normal hormonal surge meets an unhealthy internal environment. Cortisol levels naturally peak in the morning. This hormone tells the liver to release glucose into the bloodstream so the brain has immediate fuel. At the same time, adrenaline increases heart rate and causes blood vessels to constrict slightly, ensuring blood is delivered quickly to vital organs. In a young, metabolically healthy person with flexible arteries, this process is smooth and well controlled. But in someone with underlying inflammation, insulin resistance, or arterial plaque, same process can become dangerous. Here is the critical point most people never hear. Cortisol and adrenaline significantly increase blood pressure in the morning. This rise is not subtle. Studies show that blood pressure can jump sharply within the first 1 to 2 hours after waking. For arteries that are already stiffened by years of high sugar intake, processed foods, chronic stress, and poor sleep, sudden pressure acts like a stress test the body did not sign up for. Imagine turning on a high pressure water system through old, brittle pipes. The weakest point is where damage will occur. Inflamed arteries are not smooth on the inside. They are irritated, narrowed, and unstable. Plaques that have been quietly building for years often develop thin caps. When morning hormones surge, the increased pressure and vessel constriction can cause these fragile plaques to rupture. Once that rupture occurs, the body reacts instantly by forming a clot, believing it is repairing an injury. In the heart, this blocks blood flow and causes a heart attack. In the brain, it results in a stroke. Another overlooked factor is that cortisol directly affects blood sugar. Morning cortisol raises glucose levels even before you eat anything. In people with insulin resistance, glucose spike is exaggerated. High blood sugar further damages the lining of blood vessels, making them less elastic and more prone to injury. So, at the exact moment when blood pressure is rising, the vessels are also being exposed to a surge of glucose, compounding the stress on the arterial wall. Adrenaline adds another layer of risk. It makes the heart beat faster and harder, increasing oxygen demand at a time when blood flow may already be compromised by narrowed arteries. This mismatch between oxygen supply and demand is a classic trigger for cardiac events. Many patients are shocked to learn that heart attacks frequently happen at rest, not during exercise. The morning hormonal surge explains why. Poor sleep amplifies this entire process. Sleep deprivation increases baseline cortisol levels, meaning the morning spike starts from a higher point. Chronic stress does the same thing. When stress hormones are constantly elevated, the morning rise becomes more extreme. This is why people with high stress lifestyles and disrupted sleep patterns face a much higher risk of early morning cardiovascular events, even if they believe they are otherwise functioning normally. What makes this especially concerning is that most people feel fine until the moment something goes wrong. There is often no warning pain, no gradual buildup of symptoms. The body follows its programmed routine, hormones surge, pressure rises, and a hidden weakness is suddenly exposed. Is why the morning hours are so consistently linked with heart attacks and strokes across populations worldwide. Understanding this mechanism shifts the focus away from fear and toward prevention. The morning hormone surge is not the enemy, it is a signal. It reveals the condition of your metabolic and vascular health. When arteries are calm, flexible, and free of inflammation, the morning rise in cortisol and adrenaline is simply the body waking up. When they are not, same rise becomes the final trigger. Expente point 2 on 600 wards anti-ADD ANWay, she NGS and kosi use on WRDs, OK WRDs, AMAK Timor PFS AN NG AGI and ADD Hakis INTS during the night. While the body is resting, an important but often ignored physiological change takes place. For 6 to 8 hours is little to no fluid intake. Breathing continues, moisture is lost through the skin, and water is expelled through normal metabolic processes. By the time morning arrives, many people wake up in a mildly dehydrated state without realizing it. Subtle dehydration has a profound effect on the blood, and it becomes a critical factor in why cardiovascular events occur so frequently in the early hours of the day. Blood is not just a liquid, it is a complex suspension of cells, proteins, clotting factors, and electrolytes. When the body loses water overnight, the liquid portion of the blood, known as plasma, decreases. Solid components remain the same, which means the blood becomes more concentrated. In simple terms, it becomes thicker and more viscous. Thicker blood does not flow as easily through small vessels, and it places additional strain on the heart, especially when combined with the morning rise in blood pressure. This is where the danger quietly builds. Thicker blood moves more slowly, increasing the likelihood that clotting factors and platelets will come into close contact. Body interprets this state as a higher risk of bleeding, so it shifts toward a pro-clotting mode. What was meant to protect you from injury now increases the risk of forming clots inside blood vessels where they do not belong. One small clot in the wrong place can abruptly block blood flow to the heart or brain. Many people assume dehydration is only a problem in hot weather or intense physical activity. In reality, overnight dehydration happens to almost everyone, every single day. The difference lies in how resilient the cardiovascular system is when facing this temporary stress. In individuals with healthy vessels and normal blood chemistry, the body compensates efficiently. In those with diabetes, metabolic syndrome, high cholesterol, or chronic inflammation, compensation becomes much harder. Blood thickness is also influenced by blood sugar levels. Elevated glucose increases osmotic pressure and alters red blood cell flexibility, making them less able to move smoothly through narrow capillaries. This creates friction along vessel walls, further slowing circulation. When this occurs in the morning, at the same time blood pressure is rising and vessels are slightly constricted, circulation becomes even more compromised. The heart must work harder to push thickened blood through an already stressed system. There is another layer that makes the morning hours especially risky. During sleep, the body naturally shifts into a repair mode. Certain clotting factors increase slightly overnight as part of tissue maintenance. When dehydration concentrates these clotting proteins, their effect becomes amplified. This means the blood is not only thicker, also more primed to clot. It is a perfect setup for trouble when underlying plaque or vessel damage is present. People often ask why these events occur without warning. The answer lies in how gradual these changes are. Thickening of the blood does not cause pain. Dehydration not always causes thirst. Plaque buildup does not announce itself. Everything feels normal until circulation is suddenly interrupted. The early morning hours are simply the point at which multiple silent factors converge at the same time. Certain habits intensify this risk. Alcohol consumption the night before increases fluid loss and worsens dehydration. High salt dinners draw water out of cells, further concentrating the blood by morning. Poor kidney function reduces the body's ability to balance fluids effectively. Even common medications such as diuretics can amplify morning blood thickness if hydration is not carefully managed. What makes this issue particularly concerning is how easy it is to overlook. People focus on cholesterol numbers and blood pressure readings, yet rarely consider blood viscosity. They may take medications faithfully, but wake up dehydrated with thick blood moving through inflamed vessels. This disconnect explains why medical treatment alone does not always prevent early morning heart attacks and strokes. The body is remarkably honest. When blood becomes thicker in the morning, it is signaling an imbalance between hydration, metabolism, and vascular health. The risk does not appear suddenly at dawn. It has been quietly building overnight. The morning simply exposes what has already been set in motion. PNT3 o 600 wardis en don ADD NI ADNJS en kosi en yusaya wardas don meteon okowardes en meki IT mo or aprofs eno and the NGA and the ADD OKS and THS. As the body transitions from sleep to wakefulness, blood undergoes subtle but powerful changes that most people never feel and never notice. One of the most critical changes involves platelets, the tiny cell fragments responsible for clotting. Platelets exist to protect you from bleeding, yet under certain conditions, their heightened activity can become dangerous. In the early morning hours, platelets are naturally more reactive, more adhesive, and more likely to clump together. This is not a defect. It is a built-in survival mechanism that becomes a threat only when the internal environment is already compromised. Platelet activity follows a circadian rhythm. As morning approaches, the body prepares for movement, potential injury, and physical activity. To do this, increases the readiness of clotting systems so that bleeding can be stopped quickly if harm occurs. Platelets respond by becoming stickier, meaning they adhere more easily to vessel walls and to each other. In a healthy vascular system, this increased readiness causes no harm and passes unnoticed. In a damaged system, it can be the final trigger. The problem begins when blood vessels are no longer smooth and resilient. Years of inflammation, high blood sugar, smoking, processed foods, and chronic stress damage the inner lining of arteries. This lining, called the endothelium, is meant to repel platelets. When it becomes inflamed or injured, it turns from a protective surface into an attractive landing zone. In the morning, when platelets are already primed to stick, this damaged surface becomes especially dangerous. At the same time, stress hormones released upon waking increase platelet activation. Cortisol and adrenaline not only raise blood pressure and heart rate, they also make platelets more sensitive to signals that tell them to clump. This creates a narrow window of vulnerability in which platelets are highly active. Blood pressure is rising, and blood vessels are slightly constricted. It is during this window that many cardiac and cerebrovascular events occur. Another critical factor is insulin resistance. Elevated insulin and blood sugar levels directly increase platelet reactivity. Platelets in people with diabetes or prediabetes are more aggressive by nature, release more clot promoting substances, and are less responsive to the body's natural anti-clotting mechanisms. When morning arrives, these already overactive platelets become even more reactive, dramatically increasing the risk of forming a clot at exactly the wrong place and time. Inflammation adds fuel to this process. Inflammatory markers circulating in the blood act like chemical signals that further activate platelets. This is why heart attacks and strokes are not simply plumbing problems caused by blockage alone. They are inflammatory events. The clot that forms in the morning is often the result of a long-standing inflammatory environment finally reaching a breaking point. What makes this especially deceptive is that platelet activation causes no pain and no warning symptoms. You do not feel your platelets becoming sticky. You do not sense them clumping together. Everything can feel completely normal until blood flow is abruptly blocked. Suddenness is why so many morning heart attacks are described as shocking and unexpected, even in people who believe they were stable or under medical care. Sleep quality plays a major role in this process. Poor or fragmented sleep increases inflammatory markers and stress hormones, both of which enhance platelet activation. Sleep apnea, in particular, is strongly linked to morning cardiovascular events because repeated oxygen drops during the night stimulate clotting systems and increase platelet stickiness by morning. Many people treat poor sleep as an inconvenience, unaware that it directly alters blood behavior. Certain medications and lifestyle habits also influence platelet activity. Smoking increases platelet aggregation. High-fat, high-sugar diets promote chronic inflammation, making platelets more reactive over time. Even emotional stress can change platelet behavior, priming the blood for clot formation during vulnerable periods like the early morning. The body does not randomly choose the morning to allow heart attacks and strokes to happen. Timing reflects a precise alignment of biological processes. Platelets become stickier, vessels face increased pressure, and blood flow dynamics change. When the vascular system is healthy, this alignment is harmless. When it is not, it becomes dangerous. This understanding reframes cardiovascular events as predictable outcomes rather than sudden accidents. Increased stickiness of platelets in the morning does not create disease. It exposes it. It reveals the cumulative effects of inflammation, metabolic dysfunction, and vascular injury that have been developing quietly for years beneath the surface. Point 600 wardes and don't ADD. Ana HENGs NDKOCA use IO wardes documentok wardes and meki itimo PRFS ione ANDGNGM ANDADD scientists. In the early morning hours, many people experience a rise in blood sugar without eating a single bite of food. Phenomenon surprises patients when they first hear about it, yet it plays a major role in cardiovascular risk. The body, guided by hormonal signals, releases glucose into the bloodstream to ensure the brain has immediate energy upon waking. In a metabolically healthy person, insulin responds efficiently and keeps this rise under control. In someone with insulin resistance, this process becomes exaggerated and harmful. Insulin resistance means the body's cells no longer respond properly to insulin signal. As a result, pancreas compensates by releasing more insulin and blood sugar remains elevated longer than it should. In the morning, when cortisol levels peak, the liver is instructed to release even more glucose. This creates a metabolic collision. Rising cortisol, elevated glucose, and an impaired insulin response occurring simultaneously. The blood becomes chemically hostile to blood vessels at precisely the time when they are already under pressure. High blood sugar is toxic to the endothelium, the delicate inner lining of arteries. Glucose molecules attach to proteins in the vessel wall through a process called glycation, making the arteries stiffer and less elastic. Stiffness prevents blood vessels from adapting smoothly to changes in blood pressure. When the morning surge in pressure arrives, rigid vessels are less able to absorb the force, increasing the likelihood of microscopic injury that can trigger clot formation. Elevated glucose also increases oxidative stress. Excess sugar generates free radicals that inflame the vessel wall and disrupt nitric oxide production. Nitric oxide is essential for keeping blood vessels relaxed and for preventing platelets from sticking. When its production is impaired, vessels constrict more easily and platelets become more aggressive. This combination creates an unstable environment where even minor plaque irregularities can lead to major events. Another underappreciated effect of insulin resistance is its influence on blood thickness and clotting. High insulin levels promote sodium retention and fluid shifts that can concentrate the blood. They also alter platelet behavior, making them more prone to aggregation. In the morning, when platelets are already more active and blood may be slightly dehydrated, insulin resistance magnifies every risk factor at once. Many people focus solely on fasting blood sugar numbers and miss the broader picture. Even individuals with normal glucose readings can have significant insulin resistance. Their insulin levels are elevated long before blood sugar rises outside the reference range. This silent phase is when much of the vascular damage occurs. By the time diabetes is diagnosed, arteries may have already been exposed to years of inflammatory and metabolic stress. Sleep disruption worsens insulin resistance, especially in the early morning hours. Poor sleep increases cortisol and reduces insulin sensitivity the next day. This means the morning glucose rise becomes even higher and lasts longer. Shift workers and individuals with irregular sleep schedules are particularly vulnerable as their circadian rhythms are misaligned, causing repeated metabolic stress during periods when the body is least prepared to handle it. Dietary habits also shape morning insulin dynamics. High carbohydrate. Late night meals keep insulin elevated during sleep, impairing fat metabolism and increasing morning glucose output from the liver. Over time, pattern trains the body to remain in a sugar, burning, insulin dominant state. The result is a metabolic system that starts each day already inflamed and unstable. What makes insulin resistance especially dangerous is how quietly it operates. There is no immediate pain, obvious signal that blood vessels are being damaged. Energy levels may feel normal, and routine checkups may appear reassuring. Yet beneath the surface, high glucose and insulin are altering vascular biology day after day. When morning arrives, the body's natural hormonal rhythms expose these vulnerabilities. The early hours do not create insulin resistance, reveal it. The surge in cortisol and glucose acts like a stress test for metabolism. When the system is flexible and responsive, balance is restored quickly. When it is not, inflammation deepens, vessels stiffen, and the risk of heart attack or stroke rises sharply, often without warning. Here's the most important takeaway. The morning doesn't cause heart attacks, it reveals vulnerability. If your arteries are healthy, your metabolism is stable, and inflammation is low, the morning surge is harmless. But if damage has been building silently, morning becomes the tipping point. The good news is this: you have far more control than you think. Every healthy choice you make today reduces the risk of a life altering event tomorrow morning. Your heart is not fragile, it's responsive. Take care of it, and it will take care of you.